Let's go back to our big story as well. Keir Starmer coming under fire for an apparent surrender squad that he's put together, ready to drop Brexit for closer EU ties. This is the claim. Apparently a Whitehall team of 100 civil servants has been set up to work on negotiations with Brussels to achieve the Prime Minister's bid for a reset in relations. Now, I don't think anybody thinks it's a bad thing to have good, solid ties with trading partners. If they're our nearest neighbours, so be it. That's fantastic. But what does it mean? And there is certainly some concern. Earlier, Keir Starmer talked about economic and defence ties. We know that there's a big focus, and there is a suggestion that the EU will look to bring us under their food and agriculture rules and regs. That sounds more than you do. I mean, if we trade with America, they don't say, yes, we want to control the rules around your food. So what does this mean in the grander scale? Let's speak with James Ball, political editor at the New European, Lance Forman, former MEP and businessman. Welcome to you both. I mean, James, firstly, you know, understandably, there was a referendum, 52-48. We know the result. It's been an absolute mess ever since. I think we can all agree on that, whether you're pro or anti, whatever your position is on the EU. It's anything but straightforward, and it's not yet been fully sorted. But in terms of what's happening here, do you suspect Keir Starmer is up to no good behind the scenes, bearing in mind this is a man that agitated for us to remain in the EU despite a democratic referendum?
I mean, I would love it if I thought Keir Starmer was up to what you call no good behind the scenes. I am sort of one of these reactionaries who think we need close trading ties with the 27 countries.
That's good, yeah, I think we all agree on that, though, don't we? But do we want rules and regulations dictated by Brussels?
But every political leader since and including Boris Johnson has said there needs to be a reset and there needs to be some sort of reassessment of the relationship. Boris Johnson sort of forced his MPs to agree that his deal was wonderful, and then within a year was trying to renegotiate it himself over some of the Northern Ireland issues, over other things. Rishi Sunak had a team set in trying to get closer trading ties, trying to get relations, and Keir Starmer has the same team Rishi Sunak does. And actually, what's demoralising quite a few people in the EU is he's come in with exactly the same red lines and exactly the same rules as his two Tory predecessors. He doesn't want to do anything on fish, which is 0.03% of the UK economy. It's absolutely tiny. He doesn't want to do something like exchange of movement for under 30s to work and study, which is very popular with the UK public and is a big EU demand that could get us something. And we sort of risk getting nothing and giving nothing. I mean, the sort of joke here is that we do actually comply with all the EU rules on food and agriculture anyway, because we kind of have to. If you want to sell in Northern Ireland, you have to do it. If we want any kind of export, you have to do it. And because we started with the same rules, and a lot of companies are multinational, it's just simpler to follow them. So we're kind of already complying with the EU laws, but he's got a team that's trying to get a better deal without changing anything. And so it's fine for the Tories to make some hay with this. They're doing their jobs, but it's exactly the same unit that existed in Number 10 under Rishi Sunak and exactly the same that existed under Boris Johnson. And it's going to deliver exactly the same, which is very little.
Lance, I mean, based on what you've just heard there from James, I mean, nothing to see here, Governor.
Well, I'm amazed we're even discussing Brexit now. You know, you'd think it was all sort of done and dusted and people had forgotten.
Come on, it was only 8 years ago, Lance. Wasn't that long ago?
I know, but we're living in a whole new world now. You know, we're living in a world where people are realising that if you've got too many rules and regulations, your economy just stagnates. That's why the EU hasn't grown for the last 20-odd years. And, you know, to take countries like Argentina, you know, I know it's a different sort of level of GDP, but they've completely slashed government departments, getting rid of regulations. After 100 years, they finally got a budget surplus. It's incredible. America, you know, Donald Trump is coming in. He's a free marketeer. He's brought in Musk to scrap regulations. They're going to be scrapping regulations big time. They want to have a great relationship with us. If we go off and sort of sulk and say, no, we're just going to tie in with the EU and keep all these regulations in place, we're missing the biggest opportunity of our lifetimes as a nation. And also, Ian, yesterday we acceded to the CPTPP, the Common and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. That is as big a trade group as the EU. We have just, we are now part of that. It's in the Far East with Japan. It's also Latin America, Peru. And the great thing about that trading organisation, unlike the EU, is that we get free trade with them, but we don't have to have their rules. We don't have to stick to Japanese rules when we make our food and do everything else. There's mutual recognition of rules, and that's how it should be. We each have our own rules and cultures. Let's accept each other's.
Yeah, and of course we could only join that pact because we're not in the EU as well. It should be it should be said. James, I mean, based on what Lance has just said, I mean, there does seem to be a sort of an entrenched, almost evangelical physics immovable object over there in Brussels that no, you can't have this agreement without signing up to this agreement. These rather curious caveats that are thrown out in the EU Parliament for anyone who wants to get close to anything they do. It's almost a protection racket going on there. Why can't they do what the Indo-Pacific trade agreement does? As Lance says, our arrangement with the United States won't involve monkeying around with any rules and regulations about how we grow a runner bean. We'll just have a piece of paper signed, won't we? It doesn't have to be bureaucratic, and it doesn't have to take us closer, which this will.
Look, let me slightly shock you here by agreeing with you. I am not a happy-clappy EU is wonderful and skipping and everyone loves harmony there. Of course it's a protection racket. The problem is, if there's a massive protection racket running on your doorstep, you do a lot better if you're in it than you're out of it. We used to be able to...
So we should join the MAFIA, almost.
Essentially, yes. I mean, they are going to continue running as a mafia. No one will stop them running as a mafia. And we used to be on one of the big seats. We used to be a capo. And now we are sitting there having to sort of deal with what we get. And look, CPTPP, perfectly fine. It's a nice trade deal. The EU was worth about 20 to 40 times that on GDP, and that's conservatively. Like, this is small beans. It's a rounding error. I'd rather have it than not. Sure, I'm not going to kick off about it, but it is a rounding error. Geography is destiny. We are nearest to these countries. We do more trade with these countries. We will need to. The physical location of the UK matters. The depth of trading agreements matter. And the reason CPTPP doesn't do much to us and doesn't put requirements on us is it's quite a shallow deal that doesn't cover very much. And so you can compare these things, but it's a little bit like, if someone's just paid an absolute fortune and, if you get home and find out your partner's taken out a 30 grand loan from a loan shark to get you some solar panels on your roof. And they tell you, oh, no, but it's going to save you 80 quid a month. And it's like, yes, but how much are we paying to the loan shark every month? It's like that. They're not comparable. You are paying this tiny sum out. Where you're getting this tiny sum from... So
you're saying, James, it's kind of an inevitability, really. This is sort of how it has to be, even if it's not perfect. Lance, is that reasonable? We've got to join the Dons over there in Brussels to make this work?
There's a few things there that James just said that just aren't correct. I mean, the GDP of the countries within the CPTPP are the same. It's pretty much the same as the EU. But the difference is that the CPTPP countries are growing about 8% per annum, whereas the EU is totally stagnating. On the question of trading with people close by you, yeah, we do more trade with the EU at the moment, but our biggest single trading partner as a country is the USA. And that's certainly, as far as I'm aware, a lot further away than France. I am an exporter, and when you export, what you realise is that the costs of exporting are not the distance. The costs are filling in all the documentation, loading the truck or loading the plane, unloading the truck or the plane at the other end. Whether it's flying for 2 hours or flying for 10 hours doesn't really add a huge amount to the cost. So it's not about, we shouldn't be looking at distance. We should be looking at where our future markets are, where the growth is. And on services, if you're a lawyer advising companies in Peru, it doesn't matter. You don't have to fly there. You do it all online. So, as a business person, you look for growth markets, and the EU is stagnating. And that's why there's a lot of demand for change within Europe itself. People are sort of having doubts about the EU, and the EU's their huge fear is that if we're successful as a nation outside the European Union, other countries in the EU will want to follow our lead. And that's why they want to punish us.
I mean, James, that is a fair point, isn't it? I mean, you can see already Italy would be a good example. I know they've said, and even Le Pen has said in France, that if she were in power, we're not any longer looking to leave as such. But boy, they will have their eye on our direction of travel, won't they? Because if they sniff that there is a way to get life done without having to adhere to a collective of 20-odd other countries, they're going to be running for the same decision, won't they?
I mean, honestly, this is UK vanity. We're a medium-sized country. I think the EU should pay more attention to us than they do. But you go out there now and talk to them. We are not top of mind. We are not middle of mind. We are somewhere near the bottom. You know, Hungary is not looking to leave the EU. France and Italy aren't looking to. They're sort of looking to reform it from within, but they're also looking to score points doing it. Mm. You know, we would have actually been quite a useful ally to a lot of the Eurosceptics coming through now who are trying to say it doesn't have to be ever closer union. It doesn't have to be political. Why don't we go back to making this about trade and about standards and about removing barriers instead of making them? We actually could have been quite a good force on that, but we've made ourselves irrelevant, and actually they're just not that interested.
I mean, we are still. I mean, you say that, but we are a massive. We've got a lot of money. They want some of that money, right? I mean, they want clearly our trade. We need theirs as well, of course we do. But I mean, they wouldn't. You wouldn't rule out one of your biggest clients, which is what we are.
No, but they don't feel any need to give us special treatment in either direction. They're not punishing us. They're just not. They don't feel a need to give us anything bespoke. Like that, we might see that as a punishment, but they're treating us like they would any other non-EU.
Okay, but James, can you not see, James, that, you know, Keir Starmer was a man who clearly voted Remain, and that's fine, it's a democracy and stuff. He agitated a lot in Parliament to try and challenge the authenticity of the Brexit vote. We know that within his DNA, and he couldn't be more European if his name was Giscard d'Estaing. You know, I mean, this guy breathes and bleeds EU. So the idea that he wants, like, real close ties, as distinct from a few, you know, little trading arrangements, is not exactly a massive leap of hyperbole, is it?
I mean, I think the idea that Keir Starmer is a conviction warrior can be safely thrown out. You know, he's spent a lot of the last month shouting that the Tories were too generous on immigration, and he was a human rights lawyer. He campaigned for Remain, and now he's very determined about his red lines. I don't think he's got a secret left-wing agenda. Okay.
All right.
You know, he's just going to plod along. He is a plodder.
Lance, it's the same question. Do you sense that in his heart, in his DNA, that Keir has a bottom drawer plan that ideally would take us right back in?
Well, I certainly find Keir Starmer very agitating, and I don't think he knows what he's doing, quite frankly. I mean, he's single-handedly destroying the British economy by itself, whether we're in the EU or not. All his tax plans are absolutely disastrous, and particularly for, you know, a business like mine. We're a family business. He's just introduced something that's, he's removed something called business property relief, which, in fact, it was a Labour government that brought this in the 1970s, where family businesses like farmers, you know, if the owner, suddenly pops his clogs, the business gets taxed for inheritance tax, and it basically breaks up and destroys businesses. Now, given that 90% of businesses in the UK are family businesses, this is extraordinarily destructive. So it's nothing to do with the EU. You know, he can single-handedly destroy our country. We don't even need to mention France or Germany. So, you know, we need to sort out the home front first, I'm afraid.
All right, listen, guys, thank you. James Bull and Lance Forman. James, of course, political editor at the New European. Lance Forman, he's a former Brexit Party MEP and businessman. Over to you. Where do you sense Starmer is on this? Closer ties is a good thing, you know, if you get good ties with somebody. But if you're tied in, as distinct from a good relationship, then you're in a whole different place then, right? I mean, this is an organisation we were in for 50 years. And in relative terms, we left 8 years ago. And still, this thing isn't fully sorted. So I don't think it makes you some sort of conspiracy theorist to wonder whether Keir Starmer is playing a different kind of fiddle to what we thought he should be.